first time Rayan saw him, the world was hushed in rain. He stood behind the curtain of his new kitchen window, the kettle humming low behind him, and watched a man in a dark sweater carry a bag of groceries from his car to the porch next door. His steps were unhurried, precise. There was a stillness to him, like someone who didn't mind the wet, who had made peace with being soaked through. Rayan wasn't looking for anyone. Not anymore. He had arrived 2 days earlier, dragging behind him the silence of a love gone wrong. His previous apartment had echoes in the walls, arguments, late returns, apologies that never came. Here the room smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil. A blank slate, the real estate agent had called it. A place to start over. But even blank slates have windows, and this one framed a man he couldn't quite ignore. He saw him again the next morning, this time under clearer skies, sweeping fallen leaves from his steps. Older, 40, maybe a little more. But there was a grace in his movements, a calm Rayan found disarming. Their eyes met, just once. No wave. Just a nod, firm and slow, like a page turning in a book. Rayan nodded back. That evening, the rain returned. It came heavier, gentler. The kind of rain that doesn't demand shelter. Rayan stood outside on his small back porch, letting it dampen the ends of his sleeves. Across the narrow strip of lawn, the neighbor was there again, lighting the lanterns on his back fence. The glow softened the lines of his face. And then it happened. A look. Not long, not searching. Just long enough to land somewhere deep in Rayan's chest, where hurt had built its nest. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't pity. It was a question. Or maybe a remembering. Rayan looked away first. He went inside without understanding why his breath had changed. Why his fingers trembled just slightly as he closed the door. He told himself it was nothing. That people looked at people. That he was just raw, still unhealed. Still hearing his ex's voice saying someone else's name. But in bed that night, the memory of the man's eyes lingered like the scent of rain in the folds of his shirt. By morning, he'd decided it meant nothing, a passing moment. A trick of light and loneliness. And yet, when he drew the curtains to let in the pale winter sun, he found himself glancing next door, just for a second, just to see if the man was there. He was, and he was already looking back. Their conversations began in fragments. Half smiles over shared hedges, a passing comment about the stubborn cold, the sound of a name spoken softly. Ayan. That was his name. He said it like it belonged to someone else. Rayan repeated it once, just to hear how it settled on his tongue. It didn't feel foreign. There was a simplicity to how things unfolded between them. No grand gestures, no declarations, just moments, carefully placed. One morning, Rayan found a cup of tea waiting on his porch rail, steam curling into the sharp air. No note, just presence. The next day, he returned the gesture with a small bowl of lemon rice, still warm, tucked under foil. They never called it anything. Not friendship, not something more. It just was. Ayan spoke little about himself, but when he did, his voice was low and deliberate, as though each word had passed inspection before being offered. He had lived on the street for nearly a decade, taught literature at the university once, now worked from home. I write things no one reads, he said with a faint smile, the kind that hid something. Regret or peace, it was hard to tell. Rayan didn't press. He knew what it was to carry silence like a coat you didn't want to take off in someone else's house. One evening, the power flickered out during a sudden storm. Rayan stood by his window, watching the neighborhood dip into shadow. Ayan's porch light, somehow, remained steady. Moments later, a soft knock. Ayan, holding a spare lantern. "You okay with the dark?" he asked. Rayan didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure if he was. "I think I've gotten used to it," he finally said. Ayan didn't laugh. He just nodded, placed the lantern in Rayan's hands and said, "Still. Light helps." That night, they sat across from each other in the golden glow. 2 mugs, warming their palms, the storm rumbling faintly in the distance. Ayan didn't ask about Rayan's past. He didn't need to. He watched him the way one watches the sea after a storm, gently, patiently, waiting to see if the waves might calm. At one point, Ayan spoke without looking up. "Sometimes we don't need to be saved," he said. "Just seen." Rayan swallowed. Hard, the words hit a place untouched for months. He nodded once, and Ayan finally looked up. Nothing more happened. No touching, no leaning in. Just silence. Heavy, comforting silence. But when Ayan stood to leave, his hand brushed against Rayan's arm. Brief, unintentional, yet impossibly deliberate. Rayan felt it long after the door had closed. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how quiet could feel so loud. The days folded into one another like pages pressed flat by time. Rayan began to notice the way Ayan's presence lingered, on the porch swing that creaked just after dusk, in the scent of old paper and clove that drifted through the breeze, in the rhythm of footsteps pacing his side of the fence when the world had gone quiet. Rayan told himself it was nothing, that it wasn't becoming something. But then came the morning when Ayan didn't appear. Not in the yard, not by the mailbox, not even in the window where he usually sipped his first coffee. The absence gnawed at Rayan more than he expected. He waited until afternoon, then finally crossed the patch of lawn between them. He knocked, hesitantly. Ayan answered slower than usual, and when the door opened, he looked different, tired, paler, the lines on his face heavier, like sleep had turned against him. "Sorry," Ayan said, voice low. "Rough night." "Everything okay?" Rayan asked. There was a pause, then a small nod. "Yeah, just old things catching up." He didn't elaborate, and Rayan didn't press, but in that silence, something shifted. The distance between them no longer felt polite, it felt painful. They sat on Ayan's porch in silence that evening. Rayan brought over 2 bowls of soup. Ayan barely touched his. When the wind picked up and rattled the dry leaves across the steps, Rayan asked softly, "Do you want to talk?" Ayan shook his head, but after a long moment he began anyway. "I was married once," he said. "Long ago, when I still believed in neat endings." Rayan didn't speak. "We lived here. He left after the second miscarriage. Said I was too still for him, too quiet. I told him I'd become loud for him if he stayed." "And did you?" Rayan asked. Ayan gave a sad smile. "No, I just became silent in different ways." Rayan didn't know what to say. So he simply reached over, resting his hand over Ayan's. It was the first real touch between them, and it trembled with everything they hadn't said. Ayan didn't pull away. "I don't know what this is," Rayan whispered. "You don't?" "Have to," Ayan replied. But Rayan did know, somewhere deep and unformed. It wasn't lust. It wasn't even comfort. It was the unbearable closeness of being seen without having to perform. A car door slammed down the street, a dog barked twice, and the world moved forward. But they stayed in that stillness, hand over hand, like 2 people learning how to breathe, in the same rhythm again. It wasn't a confession, but it was something close. The first snow arrived like a secret, quiet, slow, almost apologetic. Rayan watched from the window, the flakes tumbling through pale morning light, softening everything they touched. The world looked different in white, quieter, truer. He wrapped himself in a scarf and stepped outside without thinking. Across the yard, Ayan stood on his porch, already looking in his direction. They hadn't spoken in days, not since that night on the steps. Not from distance or fear, but from the strange reverence that follows a moment too sacred to name. But something in the snowfall urged movement. Ryan crossed over. Ayan didn't speak as he opened the gate. Instead, he handed Ryan a folded piece of paper, aged and creased at the corners. "I found this last night," he said. "Wasn't sure I'd ever give it to anyone." Ryan hesitated, then unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. A poem, unpublished. Simple words about a man who never left his house but found entire galaxies in the voice of the boy next door. Ryan read it twice, then looked up. "You wrote this?" Ayan nodded. "Years ago, when I thought maybe one day someone would understand." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like standing at the edge of something both terrifying and beautiful. "I don't want to be just another temporary place for someone," Ayan said finally, his voice almost lost in the snow. Ryan stepped closer, not touching, not reaching, just near enough for warmth to pass between them. "You're not," he whispered. "You're the first place that's ever felt still enough for me to stay." Ayan's eyes flickered, something fragile breaking behind them. They didn't kiss. They didn't embrace. They simply stood in the snow, shoulder to shoulder, while the world softened around them. Later that evening, they shared dinner, candlelight casting golden pools across the kitchen table. Ryan brought out an old record, player from storage, and Ayan, after a moment of hesitation, smiled at the crackling notes of an old jazz tune. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. As the night grew deeper and the wind curled around the windows, Ayan finally asked, "So, are you staying this time?" Ryan looked at him, not at his face, but at the quiet strength behind his eyes, the unspoken kindness in the way he set a plate down, the patience in how he waited without demanding. "I never really left," he said. The fire burned low. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt full of things still becoming, of wounds still healing, of love not shouted, but whispered into rooms that once only knew echo. And in that warmth, without a single promise spoken, everything changed.